that the war over there can become a war over here. Because what has happened as a consequence of these wars fought in Afghanistan and Iraq has been a growth in a racist backlash against Muslim people in this country itself. We see that in the high-profile arrests of Muslims of either British or Pakistani origin, then immediately released without fanfare. We see it in the rise in violence directed against Muslims on the streets. We see it in the attacks, for example, the one mounted against Dawud Abdullah of the Muslim Council of Britain for expressing what are mainstream views about the Palestinians, not just mainstream amongst Muslims in Britain, but mainstream amongst far wider circles as well. A climate of fear and even hatred, which of course people like the British National Party are only too eager to exploit, has been whipped up by mainstream politicians and mainstream media all too often against British Muslims. That is a consequence of the wars that have been fought around the world, and that is why, from the very beginning, the Stop the War Coalition not only said, stop these wars, stop these invasions, but also said there can be no racist backlash against people in Britain because of the foreign policy being pursued by our government. So that's an additional reason to put Britain's relations with the rest of the world right, to end these neo-colonial wars because they have a dreadful impact on our own society as well. Now, there is no prospect of a military solution to the crisis now unfolding in Afghanistan. That should be evident to anyone that has ever read or studied history. You can read the history of all the British military interventions in Afghanistan, and this is the fifth over the last 200 years. The only military intervention in Afghanistan I've ever seen or heard of at work was the one that was immortalised in Carry On Up the Khyber Pass with Sid James and Hattie Jones. But that's not a sound guide to history. The fact is the Afghan people wish to exercise the same right as every other people, which is the self-determination to exercise sovereignty to achieve a political solution that suits them for the development of their own society. Whatever values we think our society holds, and however superior we may think that they are, we have at least to recognise they cannot be imposed by force, and the attempt to do so will need resistance from any self-respecting people, any self-respecting country. And that is to a large extent what is happening in Afghanistan. It is used as shorthand that this is the Taliban fighting the NATO occupation. Many Afghans I know say it is far more complicated than that. Yes, there is the Taliban exists, but what is now risen is some more Pashtun nationalism of people that do not wish their country to be invaded, occupied, and dictated to from abroad. And here we can see, as Salma said, that this is a conflict now spreading in the most alarming and dangerous way. By attempting to pacify Afghanistan, all the invasion has achieved is inflaming Pakistan. That the attempt to bomb the resistance in Afghanistan into submission has now created a situation where the conflict has escalated over the border. It has been followed over the border by the US Air Force, often bombing Pakistani civilians in the same way it has bombed Afghan civilians for the last 8 years, to the point of destabilising the future of the Pakistani state. And this, I think, is the first time since the birth of nuclear powers, where we've had one nuclear armed power, in this case the United States, flagrantly and regularly violating the sovereignty of another nuclear armed power, Pakistan. And this is a conflict which has capacity to spread, to cause turmoil in the region and throughout the world, exceeds even the dangers that follow from the invasion of Iraq earlier on. This is a war that has to be brought to an end. It has to be brought to an end on the basis of a recognition that there can be no solution imposed from abroad, there can be no solution imposed militarily. The only solutions can be political, and the only political solutions that stick are the ones that come from the people themselves resolving their own problems without external interference. That's why the Stop the War Coalition has now made it our main priority to campaign against, to get the British want, the British people want the troops brought home from Afghanistan. That's why Stop the War Coalition has launched a national petition. We want to get 1 million signatures, if we can, by the end of the year, to take to Downing Street to say we want to get the troops out of Afghanistan. And around that petition, to hold meetings, campaign of explanation, so people can understand the issues, can understand the dangers, can understand that Britain has no military part to play in Pakistan or Afghanistan, can understand the importance of bringing this conflict after 8 years to an end. That has to be our priority, and as ever, we want to do it on the broadest possible basis, uniting people of all religions and none, all other political persuasions, other than the overtly racist, and a united campaign to get our troops home from Afghanistan. There are many, many issues pressing on us today in politics. We have the economic crisis and the political corruption, many, many distractions. But I do believe that this remains the single most important issue facing the world today. There can be no greater issue than war and peace. We have to get our country and our government on the right side of that argument. So whatever slogans we have today, whether it's corrupt MPs out of Parliament or bankers out of the boardroom, troops out of Afghanistan is the central and greatest. And I'm sure that the Birmingham Stop the War Coalition will be fighting full throttle